Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hall H Show podcast. We are joined by a guest who was on episode 60 with the Accidental Aliens, Mr. Travis Rivas. Travis, welcome to episode 61.
Hey, how's it going?
We are again at Alter Ego Cafe and Hideout at SoCal Comics here in San Diego, California. So shout out to Bo Machado for letting us record here again. Excuse the noise because we are at the cafe, so there'll probably be some noise in the background every now and then. But
that's what happens when you're out in the world, man.
That's right. So yeah, we're glad to have Travis back to talk about the project that he sort of teased the last time he was here, Super Abled Comics. So I'm looking forward to talking about that a little bit more. Alex is also here.
How's it going?
What's up, Alex? I guess we haven't had a chance to have you on one-on-one yet here, so maybe we can delve a little bit deeper into your sort of origin story. And,
sure.
Just talk about how you were younger. When you were younger, I mean, for those of our audience who doesn't know, you were sort of born with the TAR syndrome, which is thrombocytopenia.
It's a big word, thrombocytopenia, absent radius.
Right. Thanks for the help with that.
No worries. I trip up sometimes on it too.
So I mean, I'm sure that had its own set of challenges growing up. So, tell us a little bit about your origin story, how it was growing up with that, how you got into comic books, and maybe what pop culture movies and TV series made the biggest impression on you when you were younger.
Sure. So as you said, I was born with thrombocytopenia absent radius, or we call it TAR syndrome, or TARS for short. And what that is, it's a congenital limb difference. So I was born this way, where I'm missing the radius bone in both of my forearms, and then it makes my forearms shorten and bowed. And I had surgeries very, very young. I think my first one was probably at 6 months, to kind of centralize and to make my hands and wrists more usable. And I remember my parents told me that the doctor said to them that their job was to make sure that I had the ability to feed myself and clean myself, and everything else was up to my parents to teach me how to do. So going to school, when you're a kid, any kind of difference is an open invitation to be picked on, to be bullied, to have people kind of tease you. And so that was pretty rough. And one of my big escapes and ways of dealing with that were comic books and movies. Particularly Star Wars movies wise, and then X-Men comics, because I felt like I was a mutant, right? I felt like one of the X-Men, where their whole thing was they didn't fit in, but they found their group, and I felt like I was one of them. Like I was reading about my community, in these books. But still, even reading that, none of the X-Men kind of looked like me. They didn't really have a disability other than Xavier. But the thing with Xavier is he always stayed back, right? He's the one who sent out the team. But it was, Cyclops and Wolverine and Jean and Psylocke. Those were the ones who were out there mixing it up. And so, I really gravitated towards that. And then when I was in middle school, that's when we started hearing rumors of the Star Wars prequels. Right, and so me and all my friends, we would talk about oh man, we're gonna go to Hollywood, we're gonna get an agent, I'm gonna be the next Anakin, or you're gonna be the young Anakin. This is before we knew he was gonna be 10-year-old kid, and before we knew how terrible audiences can be to people in Star Wars movies. And so we would talk about that, but then I remember thinking I could never do that because, again, nobody in movies or TVs or any of those things look like me. So I I always kind of internalized that, and it wasn't until I was older that I was able to kind of figure out, excuse me, that there's an audience out there for this kind of representation, that people really want it and they're hungry for it, and I created The Unstoppable Cherub, which is my creator-owned book, and she has a limb difference that looks pretty similar to mine. The big difference is she's an alien, and her people look like me because I felt like an alien as well, instead of having particularly TAR syndrome.
Were there any movies or TV series that you loved to watch when you were younger that made the biggest impression on you?
Yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, like, my holy trinity of fandom is Star Wars, X-Men, and Buffy. Like, those are the things that I think if you read any of my comics or any of my stories, you'll see like a sprinkling of at least two of those in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give your audience a little tease here. So for Super Abled Comics, I did a story called the Chimpanzees, and it's all about cybernetic apes who fly around the galaxy, trying to kind of make their way in the galaxy and trying to make their way home. But the cover I did for that one, it's an X-Men #1 homage. So it's not the Jim Lee, but the 1963 Jack Kirby cover. So it's like I said, those are my holy trinity of fandom.
Nice. I guess we can maybe sort of talk about your creative journey a little bit. How did you go from like a fan to actually starting to create your own comic book?
Yeah, it's actually been a pretty long journey. I'm in my mid-30s now, and it must have started. Well, I mean, it really started in high school when I started writing and getting that interest in doing that, and then probably my mid to late 20s, I kind of thought about pitching a story to one of the major companies, and having no idea how the industry worked at the time, right? Mm-hmm. I just thought you could go up to an editor at Marvel, basically apply for a job, and they would give you an artist, or even Image or any of the other companies that like they would hire you, and then they would pay for all the work to be done for you. It wasn't until like I started to really going out there and finding out that, I have to pitch this on my own. Like I have to find an artist and they need to do the pages, and then I can pitch it, and then I have to pay the artist to finish the book.
Right.
And so it was a big kind of learning curve, and a big kind of shock to the system of learning how the industry worked. Mm-hmm.
And how long ago was this?
Oh gosh, that was probably 10 years ago now.
So did you have Unstoppable Cherub in the back of your mind back then?
No, not at all. I had a story that was very kind of cliche. It's a story that you see a lot in the kind of indie scene, where it's heaven and hell, angels and demons, and then there's a teenage girl.
I see the Buffy.
Yeah, right. Teenage girl who finds out she has these superpowers, and she has her friends, and very, very Buffy inspired. And I found an artist, Johnny Greedy, who you might have known. He's in the local San Diego scene, and he's been at Comic Fest. And he did some great pages for me. But at the time, it was just kind of a little too expensive for me. And it was a story that I liked, but I just really didn't know where it was going. And so I kind of put that on the back burner. And then probably about coming up on 5 years. 5 years ago, I made like a very conscious decision that I was going to meet creators and editors and artists in the convention scene. And my very first show I ever went to was San Diego Comic Fest, where I met Scott Loss, who we would eventually form the Accidental Aliens together. And so we would team up, and we would talk shop, and we would go to shows. And I was at WonderCon 2015, I think. Selfie, pause. And I was still kind of working the Angels and Demons story, and it was WonderCon 2015, and I wanted to go see a panel that had Brian Michael Bendis in it, because Bendis was a big writing influence on me, comics wise. And I remember he was going to be in a panel for, what was the show? Powers. But before that was a panel for the Nerdist. And I really wasn't very familiar with the Nerdist. I hadn't listened to any of their podcasts or really read anything on the site. And, Chris Hardwick was moderating and talking about the site. And it came to fan questions. And I remember there was one particular audience member who asked a question. It was very self-deprecating. It was kind of a question like, how does a loser like me kind of get to be where you're at, Chris Hardwick? How do I go from here to there in this crowded field of bloggers and writers and artists and everything? How do I stand out? And I know Chris Hardwick is, there's some controversy around him, and people say that you should or shouldn't listen to things he says, but I think his advice is sound. And the advice that he gave this guy was, he said, the more true you are to yourself, the more you talk about your own perspective and your own experiences, the more you're going to stand out, because you're the only you, and you're the only kind of collection of atoms and molecules that is ever going to be and ever will be in this universe. There's only going to be one you, and that is so completely unique that the more true to your own voice and your own experiences, the more you're going to be your own voice, your own creative voice. And it was right then and there I knew that I had to do something with disability, something with limb difference, and I came home from that WonderCon show, and the idea of Cherub was just born like that. And then I reached out to a very talented artist. Her name is Megan Levins. She's done some work on the Buffy comic for Dark Horse. Oh, wow. She's done some Star Trek work for IDW, and she did a really awesome design. And the rest is that.
That's an incredible story.
Thank you.
You're also an educator.
I am.
How did you gravitate toward that as a career?
Yeah, that's when I just kind of fell into a little bit. So I grew up here in San Diego. I grew up in the Poway Unified School District, and the school district has an after-school care program called ESS that I went to as a kid. ESS being Extended School Services. And so I was really just kind of like an after-school counselor for a while, and then I made the jump to doing preschool, and particularly special education preschool. Mm-hmm. So right now I work in ASD class. It means autism spectrum disorder class, where half of my students have been diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, and the other half have no diagnosis. They're typical or peers. And so that's fun because I get to practice talking about my limb difference with them. Mm-hmm. Because kids will notice absolutely anything and everything.
Sure.
And they have no problem saying like, "Oh, why are your hands little like that? Why are you sticking your arms in your shirt?" Or however they like to say it. And then I get to practice my patience. I said, "Well, why do you have black hair or blue eyes or whatever it is?" And I get to teach them that everybody's just different. Doesn't make you any better or worse, and it doesn't mean that you can do more or less than anybody else. Everybody has their own ability, whether they have a completely able-bodied or whether they have a disability.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to teach them that about those differences at a very early age, which is very rewarding.
Cool. Not only on a journey as a creator, but you're also on a journey as an advocate. One organization that you sort of been hooked up with recently is the Lucky Finn Project.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. It's funny. You're the second person within a week to say that I'm an advocate, and it's weird because I don't really think of myself as such. Because when I think of an advocate, I think of somebody with a bullhorn on a street, yelling at politicians, and I just kind of look at it as I just out there telling the stories that I want to tell and seeing those stories that I want to see. Lucky Finn Project. So one of the things I touched upon earlier in the podcast is how I would read the X-Men comics and I would see my people or my tribe. But they were, these are all fictional characters. And when I was a kid, there wasn't a real big limb different community that I could be a part of because we didn't have the internet, we didn't have Facebook. The most I had was there was a mailing list from an organization called TARSA, and I forget what that particular acronym stands for. But it would really just be you would get a list of people in your area or all over the country, and you could just write them a letter. And maybe there would be an occasional meetup here and there. And I went to one, but I didn't really, didn't really follow up on it too much as a kid. So then as I got older and we got to see Instagram and Facebook, we got to connect to all different kinds of people with limb differences and different abilities and disabilities. And one of them was the Lucky Finn Project. And I might have heard of it because of Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things. Yeah. So she, the daughter of the Lucky Finn Project founder, she was born with a limb difference, and she loves watching Stranger Things. And so the founder posted a video of her daughter, her name's Ryan, of Ryan watching Stranger Things, and then sent it out on social media. And Millie Bobby Brown saw that, and she got some Lucky Finn swag. She got a T-shirt and some bracelets. And so she tweeted out about it or Instagrammed about it. And I got like, Lucky Finn Project, what's that? Mm. And it comes from Finding Nemo. The name comes from Finding Nemo because if you remember in Finding Nemo has one fin bigger or smaller than the other, and it's his lucky fin. And so that's really cool because it was allowed children and parents to talk about limb differences. And so the founder, her name's Molly adopted that and created Lucky Finn Project. And so I started to see all of these posts, and I started to see models, and I started to see actors and actresses, and I started to see authors, and I started to see athletes who all had some kind of difference. And I started to become really big fans of all of these people. And then every July, the second week in July, they have a get-together in Detroit where the Lucky Finn Project is based out of, and it's called Lucky Finn Project Weekend. Mm-hmm. And so last year was my first year going out there. It was July 2018. And anybody who knows me knows I don't fly. I hate flying. It's one of the biggest anxieties in my life. And so for me to actually get on a plane and to go to another state and not just say like, oh, well, I'll just drive there, is a pretty big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd actually been in contact with Molly, and she allowed me to have a table space to where I could sell Cherub. And I was tweeting out and Facebooking about how nervous I was. And she just said, hey, your tribe's waiting for you. And just hearing that gave me such a feeling of comfort and relieved any kind of anxiety I had over flying. And I went out there and I got to meet all these people that I was a fan of. People like Trace Wilson. He is a children's book author. He wrote a book called Uniquely Me, and it's about a child who has a limb difference. It's a way to talk about limb differences with children. People like Angel Jafria, who is she calls herself the Bionic Actress. She was in the Green Lantern movie. She was in the Ben Affleck movie, The Accountant. Unfortunately, she got cut from that. She's been on the Goliath TV show on Amazon. And so she's out there. She's being an advocate. People like Rebecca Marine, who is a model, and she was on Say Yes to the Dress. And she calls herself the Bionic Model because she has a prosthetic. So all of these people I got to meet, and I got to instantly connect with on a level that I haven't ever been able to connect with anybody before. And it's funny because with those shared experiences, you grow really close to strangers really fast. And ever since then, like, I've just had this whole new group of friends and this whole community that I didn't know about when I was growing up, that, little Travis really could have used when he was growing up. So it's been a very exciting time for me, and has allowed me to do projects like Super Abled Comics and talk about things, I guess, like you said, like advocacy, and touch on these issues that some issues like I didn't really notice before until they started talking about it and bringing it up, and I started to go like, oh yeah, that is kind of messed up. So yeah, it's kind of a long answer to your question.
No problem. We'll go to Super Abled Comics in a second, or a few minutes, but I know you talk about things you didn't notice before, but
Mm-hmm.
You wanted to talk about the Shazam movie,
right?
And we'll throw a spoiler alert, because even though I haven't watched it yet, or Alex hasn't watched it yet, I kind of thought this was an important topic, so I want Travis to sort of have carte blanche to talk about whatever he wants. So.
Awesome, and I really appreciate that. And I've always said how much you do for the independent scene here in San Diego, and so to give me ability to talk about this topic, I really appreciate.
Sure.
So, spoiler warnings, you guys. I'm gonna start talking about Shazam in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So Shazam just came out last Thursday, and it's a movie that's getting a lot of praise for being very inclusive and having a very diverse cast. And if you haven't seen it or don't know, much of the main cast are foster children, and the filmmakers use that to kind of diversify the cast. So there's a young African American girl. There's a Latino teenager. There's a young Asian boy. There's a big sister, and there's Freddie, who has a disability. And if you don't know, in the comics, Freddie is actually Captain Marvel Jr. So he has a superpower to where if he says Shazam, he also gets the powers of Shazam. So in the movie, Freddie is really charming. He's very funny. He's self-deprecating. They never tell you where his disability comes from, whether it was acquired or whether he was born with it, which I really loved. Because one of the things we talk about in the community a lot is that if you have a character who has a disability, you have to address it. You have to say, oh, well, how did that happen? Oh, well, why are you in a wheelchair? Mm-hmm. You know, and for a lot of us, this is just our daily lives. You know, you meet people with disabilities on the street, in coffee shops, you know, in movie theaters, and you don't always know what their backstory is. And just because they have a disability doesn't give you permission to go up and start asking about their medical history, right? Mm-hmm. So, but you have this character, Freddy, who's really funny and really self-deprecating, and he does talk about his disability, and he does it in such a funny, self-deprecating way that it reminded me of myself when I was a teenager. So I'm watching this movie, I'm like, Freddy's my guy. Freddy was me. And he in the movie, he gets picked on by bullies. And it's very much implied because of his disability, because he's seen as physically weaker, that he can't physically stand up to them. He can't take them on. And so kind of this whole movie, I'm waiting for Freddy to have the ability to stand up in some way, whether figuratively or metaphorically, mm-hmm. to kind of best these bullies. And so towards the end of the film, the whole foster family, or the kids rather, they get their superpowers. They all have the powers of Shazam. So on screen you have, you know, an African American woman Shazam character. You have an Asian Shazam character. You have the Latino Shazam character. You have the female Shazam. And then you have Freddy, and the instant he gets his powers, they show a shot of his cane dropping to the ground, and he's revealed completely, fully abled, strong, physically strong, powerful, and his disability just disappeared. Mm. And my heart dropped, and I literally had tears in my eyes, because disabled representation is so important, and showing disability. It's very, very common that we show disability as a sign of weakness, right? People look at a cane or a wheelchair or a prosthesis, and they look at you or anybody else as though there's weak or something wrong with them. And for a lot of people I know, their mobility devices, whatever it could be, or their adaptations or prostheses, are actually a sign of strength. It's what allows them to navigate in this world. Mm-hmm. What's allowed them to leave their houses or to as I kind of talked about earlier, to feed themselves and clean themselves and to be able to navigate this world. And to see that disability just erased in the film when he becomes a hero, I just think sends the wrong message. It sends the wrong message to those of us in the disability community and those to the wider audience. And one of the things I likened it to was, you know, you have this multiracial cast who all get their superpowers, but it would be like if all these characters, when they got their superpowers, they all turned into white men.
Right.
Right? So it just seemed like such an oversight on, I don't know if it was the writing or I don't know if it was the production, to just kind of have that disability disappear. And it was funny because I tweeted out about this, and I got into some exchanges, because we all know Twitter's the best place to have debates, and
yeah.
And
I read a little bit about that Twitter feed.
Yeah, and some of the responses I got, because Yahoo Movies put up an article saying that Shazam was the most diverse superhero movie, and I made a comment like, Yeah, but it's funny how when Freddy becomes a superhero, that disability just goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And I had these comments of people saying, like, well, what do you expect? You expect him to still be disabled when he's a hero? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still expect him to have a disability. And it was funny because people, they just couldn't wrap their minds around it. They just saw it as disability as weakness or unbelievable.
Right.
And I one of the comments I made was, so you have a movie where people can fly. You have a movie with wizards. You have a movie that's set in the same world as Superman and Green Lantern and Wonder Woman. And the thing you find unbelievable is that someone with a disability can have a superpower? Like that's the point you get hung up on, where you go like, oh no, that's a step too far. And so that's kind of, I think that's where that word advocacy kind of comes in.
Right.
Where, in telling our stories, I think it's going to change that perception, right? Because if we had seen a Captain Marvel because Captain Marvel is his original comic book name, or a Shazam,
right.
A Shazam that incorporated a crutch into his superhero persona, it would have meant so much to the disabled community. Mm-hmm. It would have meant so much to us. I probably would have jumped up in the theater applauding and screaming. And the fact that they just kind of missed it, just, it's one of those things you're kind of used to. You're used to seeing that disability kind of taken away, and when someone becomes superpowered, whether it's like Bucky with the Winter Soldier, or whether it's Flash Thompson when he has the Venom symbiote. Flash Thompson is a double leg amputee, but when he becomes Agent Venom, the symbiote makes the legs for him, and he looks like everybody else. So it's the idea that when you have a disability, you can't be a hero unless you're completely able-bodied. Mm-hmm. And I say no. I say no to that. Because we got some kids running around here. It's a little loud. I don't know if you guys can hear that in the background.
Yeah, they can hear
it. Because right now we have sports figures. We have Shaquem Griffin, who is a linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks, who has a limb difference. Mm-hmm. He's missing a hand. You have Jim Abbott, who threw a no hitter. He was a major league pitcher, and he threw a no hitter one-handed, literally one-handed. Mm-hmm. And people they want to jump up and applaud that, and they say, "Oh, look at that! That's so great." But a disabled superhero just apparently is one step too far for people, and so that's hopefully what I can change with things like Unstoppable Cherub, things like Super Able Comics, and any other kind of stories out there that are going to come down the pipeline from us. That's
a perfect segue to Super Able Comics. I guess the tagline for Super Able Comics is a comic anthology about superheroes with disabilities from creators with disabilities.
Right. This was definitely an idea that started with Unstoppable Cherub.
And you met these creators at Lucky Finn?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the kernel of the idea started even before I went to Lucky Finn. So we have a lot of inclusion going on right now in the comics industry, right? We've got characters like Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, who is a Muslim superhero, mm-hmm. She was written by a Muslim writer, G. Willow Wilson. Recently announced, Greg Pak and Lionel Yu are doing Wave, one of the first Filipina superheroes.
Right.
And so, and then you got Captain Marvel, and you've got Black Panther, you've got all this kind of push to have more inclusive heroes or characters.
I think Greg Pak also did the Incredible Hulk with
Amadeus Cho.
Yeah.
Was it the Totally Awesome
Right.
Hulk? So there's been this big push to really diversify superheroes. But one of the things we don't see is disabled heroes by disabled creators.
Right.
Or creators with a disability. And so that started with Cherub. And then when I went to Lucky Finn and I met all these people, I mentioned Trace Wilson before. There's one of our writers named Kim Stumbo. She had already done her own comic book called The Adventures of the One-Armed Wonder Mom, which is more edutainment than it is just straight superhero action, where Unstoppable Cherub is straight superheroes, and she uses her platform to be more educational, more direct about her education, I should say. And I started to meet all these cool creative people, and I just said, what if we all told our own stories? We all created our own superhero. And I took, my last 10 years of trying to break in the industry, took that knowledge and gave them a platform to tell their own stories. And then I got to play editor. So I got to talk to these people and say, hey, let's work on a script together. And so there's 6 of us, including myself, and so I helped 5 people along with their scripts. One of our creators is a writer-artist. His name is Brian Marquez. He already came in with his script and some of his art ready to go, because he's been working on his character, the One-Armed Wonder, for a few years now. And so I just gave him the platform to finish his story. Mm-hmm. And we got a little coffee action going on.
It's all good.
And so I just I got to play editor. I helped these people with their scripts, and then I said, okay, now you get to go find an artist. And so I do want to clarify that it's mostly our writers who have disabilities. Many of our artists, with the exception of Brian Marquez, are able-bodied.
Okay.
So that's something I'm looking to expand, and if we have the opportunity to do future editions of superhero comics, I would like to see more creators, artists with disabilities, working on this project. We did have our cover artist does have a disability. Crad Evans, who does a webcomic called Iron Crown. So you can go out there and check that out. But yeah, it right now it is a mix of disabled writers working with artists who are able-bodied, but like I said, I would like to expand that in the future.
Mm-hmm. I guess we can go a little bit more into the other stories. You mentioned Adventures of One-Armed Wonder Mom, and you mentioned Chimpanzees, which is your story.
Right.
You want to go back into your story and maybe talk about the other stories as well?
Sure. So I'll talk about mine first because I'm the most familiar with it. Mine's called The Chimpanzees. It's all about cyborg apes and flying around the galaxy. And I've got I brought over my Unstoppable Cherub artist, Maury Compatella, is doing that, doing the art on that. We also have Maury's actually helped out another one of our writers, Sarah Tuberty, to do a story called Shiara, A Light in the Darkness. That's a story about a young woman who has ABS, amniotic band syndrome, which is a limb difference that occurs in utero. Uh-huh. And in this story, there's been kind of a hive mind that's taken over this country, and everybody in the country who's infected by this hive mind looks at anything that's physically different or outside the norm, and they instantly want to terminate it. And so the lead character Shiara, has been kind of living in this world and scavenging for a number of years. And the story starts off when she runs into her best friend, who's taken over by the hive mind, and her efforts to kind of free her best friend from that. We also have Rebuilt, which is a story by Trace Wilson, who I mentioned previously. And his artist is, I have to look it up.
Sarah Fletcher?
It's Sarah Fletcher. Yes, Sarah Fletcher. Thank you, guys. And that's a story about a young woman who is in an automobile accident, and loses an arm and a leg. And she kind of goes out to find not just prosthetics, but kind of full replacements. And she's kind of trying to find a new purpose, and what does her life mean now that she is a double amputee, and how can she find purpose again? Then we have The One-Armed Wonder by Brian Marquez, which is a story about, thank you, we got it right here. So One-Armed Wonder is drawn by Brian Marquez and co-written by Kenneth Barr, and there's some art assistance by Brady Ann Parham, and that's a story a young man who his name's Damon, who is an amputee, and he wants to be kind of a social advocate, but a lot of the doors are closing right in his face, and he's getting really, really bitter about it. And his world has a superhero, a Superman like figure who kind of has to put him in his place and kind of set him on his path. We also have Cobalt, which is a story by Jake Adams and Jacob Newell. Thank you. And that is a story, it's very much kind of a darker, gritty, vigilante type story where the main character...
It sounds like it, Cobalt.
Yeah, it's really cool. He kind of gets involved with the mob to pay for his mother's cancer treatments, but a deal goes bad, and so Cobalt loses the mafia boss cuts off his fingers, and he's someone who kind of after that loses his way, and through meeting other amputees and other limb different people, kind of finds his path, but then the mob kind of comes back, and he has to kind of take care of that. We also have the One-Armed Wonder Mom, Adventures of the One-Armed Wonder Mom, which was written by Kim Stumbo and drawn by Willie Wolford. That's kind of continuing Kim's edutainment story that we were talking about earlier, where she's kind of directly talking to the audience about limb differences and her experiences with her family. So in her family, she has one of her children has been diagnosed ADHD, and so she incorporates that power to be able to, he's a super speedster, and all of her children have different abilities that relate to their real world diagnoses, and so that's fun all ages story, and I think that's 6.
Just one more.
Light
Dancing in Darkness?
No, that's Shiara, Light Dancing in the Darkness. We talked about that. Okay. The young woman on the hive mind.
That should be 6 then.
Yeah.
And
it's well, like I said earlier, this is my first chance getting to be an editor. So trying to keep track of all these stories and helping them through their creative journey has been a lot of fun, and it's really cool to see what people kind of come up with, and it's good practice for me, because then they want to go off in like different tangents and directions. I have to say, no, we only have 7 pages here, there's only so much we can do, because editing is something I would like to get to do in the future in some kind of professional capacity, hopefully.
In regard to the Super Able Comics anthology, when did you start sort of, planning it?
So it kind of came out of me doing the anthologies with the Accidental Aliens. And so if you heard the last podcast, you know that we've done these annual anthologies. And I'd seen Scott Loss kind of edit us and kind of herd us to get the project done. So I felt like I'd learned enough about that, and that I'd wanted to do, like I said, something similar with disabled creators or creators with a disability. And it just really kind of came out of that. I really wanted to be a part of the creature feature this year, but resources and time just kind of took me away. But just my experience with the aliens just kind of gave me enough knowledge, I think, to be able to do this on my own, and it's something I'm really enjoying.
Cool. Is the Super Able Comics going to be a yearly anthology as well?
I don't know if we're going to do yearly. We'll see how well this Kickstarter goes. So we are on Kickstarter right now. We have hit our $5,000 goal.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. And we have 24 days left as of this recording. We do have stretch goals in mind. We're not going to reveal them all at once. We kind of want to reveal them as we get close to them. So I think we're at 5,800 right now, 5,840. When we get to 6,000, we're going to be doing stickers of all of our individual characters.
Oh, cool.
And including those with the packages. When we get to 7,000, I think we're going to be doing trading cards, like a trading card set of each of our characters. And then we have a couple other ideas in mind that I want to hold off on until we get there. I would like to. I don't know about a yearly anthology. Excuse me. If we go well enough past our initial goal, there's ideas for maybe to do like a 2-in-1 story. We can introduce different characters. There's a lot of ideas out there. One of the things we don't want to run into is backer fatigue, which I know can be a real issue with Kickstarters.
Sure.
So we're just kind of early in the stages. Like I said, we just launched earlier this week. And so we'll kind of see where we end up. I want to see what the excitement is from the community. And by the way, the disabled community has been really great about this. They are really very motivated. They seem to be really excited. The Lucky Fin project was a huge help and a huge support. Molly is one of our greatest champions, so thank you very much, Molly, if you're listening to this.
They seem to retweet everything that you put out there.
Yeah, it's great. So they've got a pretty large social media following, and even before I met them, they were sharing. They were talking about Cherub. They were, whenever I posted a picture of me and my limb difference, they would share it, and it's really exciting, and it's really great to be part of that kind of community. So
I even saw your video with I think Stump Kitchen.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
So those of you who don't know, Stump Kitchen is a YouTube show by a friend of mine, Alexis, who is gluten-free and vegan, and she does a cooking show that incorporates her limb difference. So she likes to use it as a juicer, as a masher, as all kinds of different tools, and it's very funny. And Alexis is great. Stump Kitchen, if you guys get a chance, go on YouTube, check it out, subscribe. You won't regret it, I promise you. I show up on there a few times, so if you want to want to listen to more of me, you can do that.
So I guess your fear of flying is sort of getting less and less, because I think that show takes place in Vancouver.
So Alexis is from Edmonton, but there was an event in Vancouver called AOPA, and my friend Angel Jafria is a ambassador for a prosthetics company called Autobach. And so she was in Vancouver. Alexa said, well, if Angel's in Canada, I'll just fly over there. And, Vancouver is not that far from San Diego by plane. So I went up there and I hung out with them. And you're right. My fear of flying is getting less and less. In January, I flew to Orlando to go to a wedding from two of my friends who are both limb different, who met through Lucky Friend Project. I flew to Las Vegas last week to support my friends who were in an adaptive runway show that was put on by Zappos Adaptive and partnered with an organization called Runway of Dreams.
So Zappos, the shoe company from Amazon? Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. They have a line called Zappos Adaptive, which is all about creating adaptive clothing and adaptive shoes. So they did an event called Rethink the Runway, and all their models had some kind of disability, whether visible or invisible, which required to really rethink clothing. And that's one of those things that a lot of people, unless you have a disability, you really don't think about it. How do you tie your shoes if you don't have any fingers? How do you button your pants if you only have one hand? These kinds of things that people in my community have to think about every day, but the larger community doesn't have to think about it. So Zappos Adaptive and Runway of Dreams did this fashion show where they got to showcase all of their adaptive clothing and to show models that you wouldn't normally see on a runway. Whether it be a model using a prosthetic or in a wheelchair, or a model who has dwarfism or is some kind of smaller individual. They got to be up there and they got a chance to really shine, and it was a really awesome event to be a part of, which was hosted by RJ Mitty from Breaking Bad. If you guys don't know, RJ Mitty is an actor with cerebral palsy, and so he's been very much been an advocate of disabled actors getting roles as disabled characters and not bringing in able-bodied actors to play disabled characters. So my friend Angel Jafria is also an advocate in that field, and it's difficult because one of the things we were talking about Shazam earlier, we don't see a lot of that. There was some controversy earlier this year with that movie with Bryan Cranston.
When he's like paralyzed, fully paralyzed.
Yeah, he's a quadriplegic, and they brought in Bryan Cranston, who is an able-bodied actor, to play a disabled role. When there's a lot of very talented actors with disabilities who would have killed to have a role like that. So our voices are out there, and we're talking about it. The Rock too, in that movie Skyscraper last year, he played an amputee, and the argument is always, well, yeah, but The Rock is The Rock. You bring him in for the name, or Bryan Cranston is a name that gets people in the theater, right? But is an actor with a disability supposed to get to that level if they never get any roles? Maybe they could have done a buddy cop where The Rock was the able-bodied individual and you bring in an amputee actor to be the amputee character. You could use The Rock's name and still promote other actors who have a disability.
That's a really good point.
I flew out for Runway of Dreams. I like to always tag my posts, if fins could fly, and I like to give it a little like a movie title, right? So when I went to Las Vegas, I called it "If Fins Could Fly, Lost in Vegas."
Nice. I guess we'll take a little bit of a break, and we'll do a thunder round. Alex, take it away.
All right. First question. If you could have a meal with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be with and where do you eat at?
I think probably because this one is so fresh, I would have to say Stan Lee. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet Stan when he was still here. And it was one of those things where every show I went to, I'd be like, oh, I got to meet Stan. And I just never did. And I would, Stan Lee seems like he would like a good In-N-Out burger. So
well, you are a burger guy.
I'm definitely a burger guy. So me and Stan at In-N-Out was my answer.
Nice, cool. We know you are partial apes, but do you think King Kong could really beat Godzilla?
Ooh, I think it depends on how they do the size. Like I know in the last Kong movie, they kind of upped his size for that. I'm gonna say probably not. I think Godzilla would take him, but it would be a heck of a battle, and Kong would give just as good as he got.
Okay. All right, here we go. Next one. You are asked to create a new X-Men character. Describe the character.
I've actually thought about this. I don't want to give too much away in case I ever actually get the chance. But it's definitely a character that would have an amputation and who would use prosthetics, but not a sci-fi prosthetic, not like Winter Soldier, who always has his arm on all the time. You would see this character actually get tired of using their prosthetics, and I think
Forge had a prosthetic, right?
Forge does, but his is much more sci-fi. It seems like it's kind of integrated into his nervous system. I want to say one of the New Mutants, kind of recently, in the Messiah complex, Second Coming era of the X-Men had used a prosthetic. What's her name? Shan McCoy. I think she was an amputee for a while, but being comics, I think they gave her back her leg. So yeah, it would definitely be some kind of character like that. They would integrate real world prosthesis and not just sci-fi.
But what other X-Men would you like to be on a team with this character?
So I'm a big Generation X fan. I would bring in Chamber, who also has a facial difference. Probably Blink. Let's see. I got to go outside the Gen Xers. Nightcrawler, who has a limb difference. He has 3 fingers on each hand instead of 5.
Would it be swashbuckling?
Oh yeah, you have to with the swords and everything. That's that quick answer right off the top of my head. I have to sit down and think about it more. It's a good question. I haven't really sat down and thought about my perfect X-Men team.
This is a question borrowed from our friend Kenny Ryder from the Dumbbells and Dragons podcast. What mundane superpower do you wish you had?
What mundane superpower? The ability to fold my laundry with my mind, because that folding laundry is the bane of my existence. I can always wash and dry it and then put it in the basket, but it never seems to make its way from the basket to the drawers.
All right, cool. All right, remakes seem to be popular trend these days. What movie would you like to remake?
What movie would I like to remake? It would have to be a movie where you kind of saw a missed opportunity the first time around. Like, pick something that was really, really crappy that you can do something better with. Gosh, I don't know, man. That movie Push kind of comes to mind. That it was like the kind of that superhero movie with Chris Evans before superhero movies got big. That might be a fun one to do. Let's see. Oh, actually no. You know what? One of my all-time favorite movies is the original Lon Chaney Jr. Wolfman. And I know they did a remake with Benicio del Toro a few years ago that just really missed the mark. So I think they could do something right now. Not in this dark universe, Tom Cruise mummy thing, but something really kind of scary.
Last question. What statement would you have Bart from The Simpsons write on the chalkboard?
What statement would I have Bart write on the chalkboard? Ooh. I will not erase disabilities in superhero movies.
There you go. That'd be a good mic drop moment right there, but we still have a little bit more on the podcast to go.
Move it to the end. Edit it.
We do like to say thank you to a lot of people that helped us along the way. So we like to do a superhero shout-out segment of the podcast. Is there anybody out there who you want to say thanks to?
Oh, gosh.
Or a group of people.
Yeah, I have so many. I would like to say, first, thanks to both of my parents, obviously, who have never stopped believing in me. I'm turning this into a Journey song. I've always supported my creative dreams no matter what. I would like to say thank you to a lot of my creative teachers. My creative writing teacher in high school, Monique Lamphier Tamiyoshi, who still teaches at Mount Carmel. Rocco Versace, who is a professor at Palomar. He does a really awesome class, comic books as literature. Mm-hmm. And then Molly Stapleman from the Lucky Fan Project. Without any of these people, Cherub wouldn't exist.
Cool. I guess we can sort of flash forward and talk about any potential, future projects that you can share with our audience.
Let's see. Future projects I can share. I don't think I can. I just pitched something to a company. I won't tell you which company, but it's one of the top 5 companies in the comics industry. So we'll see if anything happens there.
Fingers crossed.
Yep. Fingers crossed, toes crossed, legs crossed, whatever you got, cross it. And then Super Ableds. Gonna get back to Unstoppable Cherub. Unfortunately, issue 3 had to take a bit of a backburn while I worked on Super Abled. That's the thing when you do independent stuff, is you got to work up the money all yourself, and that could take a while, especially to do a 22-page comic. So, pretty much those.
What other appearances do you have planned?
So I will be at San Diego Comic-Con. I'll have a small press booth with the Accidental Aliens, so come find us there. We will be here at SoCal Comics for Free Comic Book Day on Saturday, May 4th. And we're looking into some other ones, maybe earlier, maybe a little bit later in the year. So we'll announce those as they get lined up.
Cool. And both Travis and myself will be at the San Diego Writers Festival next Saturday, April 13th. At the downtown San Diego Library. I will be moderating a panel. It's called Empowered: How Indie Creators Build Universes and Communities. It takes place 3 p.m. to 3:50 p.m. It's going to, besides Travis, it's going to feature Keithan Jones, Terry Mayo, and Angela Nixon. And this is actually a panel that we sort of premiered at Black Comics Day. Some people from, San Diego Writers Festival were in the audience, and so they asked us to do it at their event as well.
Oh, nice. I actually didn't get to catch your panel, so
No worries.
It'll be exciting to be on it without having seen the preview. It's a surprise, folks.
Yeah, that should be fun. And our friend Alonso Nunez from Little Fish Comic Book Studio also has a panel at the San Diego Writers Festival. It's going to be all about the graphic novel, and it follows our panel at 4 o'clock. And also the International Mobile Film Festival, of which I am a brand ambassador, and the Hall H Show is a sponsor this year. It takes place April 27th and 28th at the Marina Village here in San Diego. We have about 30 short films and a couple of feature-length films, all made on smartphones. And I think about 15 of the filmmakers from around the world will be flying in. So I'm looking forward to meeting them. We're going to have Susie Botello, the founder, and one of the filmmakers, Seth Dacio, on the podcast. So I look forward to talking to them. Travis, where can people find you online?
You can find me online at Rivas Travis, Rivas, Travis, on both Instagram and Twitter. You can follow Super Abled Comics at Super Abled Comics on Instagram. On Twitter, it's at Abled Super. You can find the Accidental Alien Studio and buy some of my books at accidentalaliens.com. That'll give you a link to my Etsy store where you can pick up Unstoppable Cherub. And I think that's it. I think that's pretty much it for my online presence.
Well, yeah, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I always enjoy you having you on the show, and it's nice to have you on a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, so. Man, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Alex, why don't you close out the show?
All right, thank you for tuning to the Hall H Show podcast, where we love showcasing independent creators like Travis Rivas here. We believe that representation matters, so please check out the Super Abled Comics Kickstarter that features disabled superheroes created by disabled creators. If you support our mission to be the voice of independent creators, we would love a rating, hopefully 5 stars, and comments on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, please share our episodes using #HallHShow. Peace, cheers, and make it a point to visit Artist Alley and Small Press at all the comic conventions you plan on going to this year. Thank you.
Cool. And one last shout out to Bo Machado from Altered Ego Coffee for giving us the space here to record a podcast. Come to SoCal and buy some comics and check out Altered Ego and get some coffee.
Thanks, Bo.
All right. Peace. Cheers. Talk to you later. Bye.